The millionaire pretends to be paralyzed to test his girlfriend, but the maid proves true love. At the age of 30, Daniel Whitmore had become one of the most powerful young billionaires in Europe. Born into a middle-class family in Manchester, he had built Whitmore Technologies, a global software empire, in just 8 years. From the glass-walled office on the 60th floor of a London skyscraper, Daniel looked down at the vast city as if it were a kingdom belonging solely to him. He possessed everything people dream of: a penthouse worth tens of millions of pounds, a collection of gleaming Italian supercars, a lavish yacht, and a private jet always ready at his command. The media hailed him as the Tech Prince of Britain, a symbol of success and allure. And above all, he had Sophia Blake, the most famous actress in the country, a face gracing magazine covers and walking Cannes' red carpet. In the eyes of the public, they were the perfect couple, a modern-day fairy tale. Yet, behind the dazzling spotlight, Daniel felt an emptiness gnawing at him. The more time passed, the more one haunting question consumed his mind. Did Sophia truly love him, or merely the wealth and fame attached to his name? Subtle but undeniable signs troubled him. Her radiant smile when he gifted her extravagant jewelry contrasted with her distant gaze whenever deeper conversations about fears and insecurities arose. Her sparkling presence at glamorous parties, followed by her sudden absence during his toughest days. Daniel, with the sharp instincts of a businessman trained to analyze every detail, gradually arrived at a bitter conclusion. The woman by his side might not truly love him, but rather the brilliance that surrounded him. One October evening, as London's lights glittered beyond the vast penthouse windows, Daniel sat motionless, a half-empty glass of whiskey in his hand, its bitterness unnoticed. Inside him, a wild idea began to take shape, a plan both reckless and cruel, yet the only way he believed he could uncover the truth. If Sophia truly loved him, she would stay, even when he was no longer Daniel Whitmore, the powerful symbol of success, admired by the world. But if her love was built only on glamour, then once stripped of it, everything would vanish. That night, Daniel called Dr. Henry Collins, his private physician and one of the few loyal friends from his youth. When Henry entered the office, Daniel revealed his intention, leaving his friend nearly speechless. He wanted to stage a devastating car accident that would leave him paralyzed from the waist down. Henry protested fiercely at first. "Daniel, do you realize what you're saying? This isn't a game. You'll break hearts, and you'll be living a lie yourself." But when he looked into Daniel's eyes, eyes that carried both unyielding resolve and a rare fragility, Henry understood his friend had already made up his mind. The plan gradually took shape. With Henry's expertise and medical connections, they could fabricate convincing reports, rent professional equipment, and even stage the scene of an accident. Daniel would disappear for a few days, then return with a story of a horrific car crash. From that moment, he would appear in a wheelchair, seemingly dependent on the care of others. That night, sleep eluded Daniel. He lay awake, staring at Sophia as she rested peacefully beside him, her golden hair cascading across the pillow like a flawless painting. He wondered, the next day when she awoke, to hear that the man beside her would never be the same. Would the light in her eyes still remain? And so, after days of careful preparation with Henry, the plan was arranged down to the last detail. Fabricated medical reports, rented hospital equipment installed in the mansion, a story of a terrible accident crafted in advance. Now all that remained was to witness Sophia's reaction, the moment that would decide everything. News of Daniel's accident spread quickly. Tabloids screamed with headlines, "Tech Prince in tragic crash, may be confined to a wheelchair for life." When Henry phoned Sophia to inform her, her voice caught for a brief moment, then swiftly steadied. "I'll fly back immediately," she said. But Daniel, trained to read the subtle language of human behavior, heard the long pause before her words of comfort, as if she were weighing something first. That night, the growl of Sophia's Aston Martin echoed along the gravel driveway of the mansion, and Daniel's heart pounded as though he were closing a billion-pound deal. He waited in his wheelchair, hands trembling slightly against the armrests. The door opened, and Sophia entered as if stepping onto a red carpet. She wore a blazing red Dior dress, her hair perfectly styled, her face painted flawlessly. For a fleeting second, Daniel felt he was watching a film premiere, not a woman rushing to the side of the man she loved. The surreal perfection of her entrance chilled him more than the accident ever could. Sophia rushed toward him, yet her movements were calculated, careful not to crease the gown. "Daniel, my love, this is terrible." Her voice trembled, but her eyes wandered, avoiding direct contact. When Daniel, in his role as a disabled man, explained that doctors had said recovery could take months, perhaps years, with the possibility he might never walk again, he caught a flicker of disappointment flash across Sophia's eyes. So quick an ordinary person might miss it, but to Daniel it was as clear as figures on a financial report. "Of course I'll be by your side," Sophia replied, but almost immediately she began listing the commitments she couldn't cancel. A jewelry campaign in Paris, a film premiere in New York, Fashion Week in Milan. Each reason sounded less like devotion and more like excuses to stay away. Within 24 hours, Sophia was gone, boarding a business-class flight out of London, leaving Daniel alone in the vast silence of his mansion. He watched her silhouette vanish into the distance and felt the crushing certainty. The love he had clung to was nothing more than an illusion. After Sophia's departure, the mansion sank into a heavy emptiness. The grand halls that once hosted glittering parties now echoed only with the lonely wheels of Daniel's chair. It was then that another presence, quiet but unwavering, began to shine. Emma Hayes. Emma had worked for Daniel for over 3 years, yet he had scarcely noticed her. A 33-year-old woman of average height, with brown hair always tied neatly, dressed simply and practically, moving silently through the house with efficiency. To Daniel, she had always been a faint background detail in the extravagant painting of his life. But now, with the silence closing in, he began to truly see her. The morning after Sophia left, Emma entered his room carrying a silver tray. On it lay a breakfast prepared with meticulous precision: perfectly fried eggs, a strong espresso, fresh orange juice, and warm toast. "I remember you like it this way," Emma murmured, setting the tray down and adjusting the cushion behind his back with gestures that felt natural, unforced. Daniel looked at her, surprised for the first time by the simplicity yet depth of her care. Unlike Sophia, Emma's eyes carried no pity, no sense of obligation, only warmth, like a small flame burning steadily in a cold winter night. Day after day, Emma remained by his side in the smallest of details, pulling up the blanket when the night grew chilly, reading aloud when he couldn't sleep, listening patiently when he confessed his weariness. She never rushed, never sighed with annoyance. Her care seemed as effortless as breathing. One afternoon, Daniel asked why Emma had chosen this work in London. After a brief hesitation, she revealed that her younger brother, Lucas, had been born with a heart defect requiring an expensive surgery. In Wales, the waiting lists were impossibly long, so she had left her hometown, working tirelessly in London to save every pound for the operation. The surgery had succeeded, and now Lucas was studying medicine, aspiring to become a pediatric heart surgeon. Hearing this, Daniel felt a tightening in his chest. This ordinary woman, living quietly in his house for 3 years, carried within her a story of sacrifice and resilience he had never noticed. In the warm glow of the sunset streaming through the window, Daniel realized for the first time that Emma was not merely a housekeeper. She was the embodiment of gentle strength, of a sincerity he had overlooked in a world blinded by wealth and glitter. In the days that followed, something shifted between Daniel and Emma, so subtly that neither noticed it at first. What began as brief exchanges grew into long conversations that stretched for hours. The boundaries of employer and housekeeper faded. What remained were simply two souls learning how to listen to each other. Daniel, long accustomed to cold boardrooms and sterile reports, was astonished to discover Emma's depth of knowledge in literature and languages. She spoke of her favorite novels, of French poems she had once translated in university. He listened quietly, feeling his mind touch, for the first time in years, a world simple yet profound. Emma, in turn, saw a different Daniel. Not the proud tech mogul splashed across magazine covers, but a man capable of listening, sometimes clumsy, sometimes vulnerable. One evening, when Daniel confessed that his greatest fear was loneliness, a fear he had never admitted to anyone, Emma gently placed a hand on his shoulder. She said nothing, yet the light touch told him he was no longer alone. There were small, almost invisible moments that pierced Daniel's heart. One evening, when his feigned back pain made him wince, Emma unhesitatingly prepared the sofa in his room to stay overnight, ready to rise whenever he needed her. That night, Daniel lay awake, listening to the rhythm of her breathing in the dark. Around 3 a.m, he opened his eyes to see her rise quietly, adjusting his blanket with infinite care, then softly brushing a strand of hair from his forehead. Her whisper trembled, yet overflowed with devotion. "Please get better soon. I can't bear to see you like this." Daniel bit down hard, fighting to contain himself, his chest tightening with an ache he could not ignore. In that instant, he realized the undeniable truth. Emma loved him, not for power, not for wealth, but for the man he truly was, even as the world saw him as broken and confined to a chair. From that day on, Daniel's gaze toward Emma changed entirely. He noticed the little things, the way she hummed Welsh melodies while cleaning, the crease in her brow when absorbed in an old novel, the endless patience with which she listened to his hidden fears. One morning, as Emma entered with his breakfast as usual, Daniel asked suddenly, "Emma, if I could never walk again, what would you think of me?" Setting the tray down, she met his eyes directly, her voice steady. "You would still be Daniel Whitmore, intelligent, kind, someone who can make others laugh, someone with a generous heart. Your legs don't define who you are." Stunned, Daniel pressed further. "And if I needed care for the rest of my life?" Emma smiled, her eyes glowing with rare sincerity. "Then I will be here for the rest of my life." In that moment, Daniel understood he had found something his glittering career had never given him, a love true and unconditional, asking for neither fame nor fortune. Yet, as the days of quiet tenderness passed, doubts began to creep into Emma's mind. Having cared for an ill sibling for years, she was too perceptive not to notice the difference between a true patient and someone merely acting. It began with small details. Daniel, though supposedly paralyzed, had well-toned leg muscles, showing none of the atrophy she had seen in real patients. Once, when she accidentally dropped a book near his feet, he instinctively drew his leg back. Emma froze for a moment, then pretended not to notice. On another night, as he slept, she saw his toes twitch faintly in rhythm with his dreams. Alone, each detail seemed harmless. Together, they formed a troubling picture. The suspicion grew until one afternoon, while tidying Daniel's study, Emma noticed several medical files left on his desk. With the familiarity of someone accustomed to medical terms from Lucas's years of treatment, she realized immediately. The reports were too generic, almost as if written by someone with no real expertise. Her heart pounded as she flipped through page after page, her hands trembling. That night, she took a desperate step. She unlocked the safe in Daniel's office, knowing the code, his mother's birthday, because she had once overheard him mention it. As the heavy door swung open, what lay inside stole the breath from her chest. Contracts between Daniel and Dr. Henry Collins explicitly stating non-traditional medical consultancy services. Emails discussing convincing staging and behavioral testing, receipts for rented wheelchairs and fake medical equipment. Everything was there, laid bare, undeniable. Emma sank into the chair, the papers slipping from her grasp. Tears streamed silently down her face. It had all been a lie. The sleepless nights she had spent by his side, the whispered prayers, the hope she had nurtured, all of it belonged to a play in which Daniel had been both director and actor. And the cruelest twist of all, she had fallen in love with him inside that lie. Unable to face him, Emma made her decision. She packed her belongings quietly, leaving behind a brief resignation letter on the kitchen counter. At 3 a.m, she called a taxi, dragging her suitcase through the hushed mansion. The door closed softly behind her, carrying away her shattered heart. But what Emma didn't know was that upstairs, Daniel was still awake. Tormented by his own deception, he heard the faint roll of suitcase wheels on the gravel outside. And in that moment, it felt as though his chest had been ripped open. As dawn broke, Daniel descended to the kitchen and found it empty. On the table lay a neatly folded sheet of paper. Emma's brief resignation letter. No reproach, no explanation, just a few dry lines ending with her signature. Yet each word cut into his heart like a blade. Daniel felt the world collapse around him. All his wealth, fame, and power, the things he once believed could buy anything, now meant nothing. He sank into a chair, clutching the letter so tightly it crumpled in his hands. Never had he felt so utterly alone. In desperation, Daniel immediately called Henry. His voice trembled. "She knows everything, Henry. She's gone. I have to find her, at any cost." On the other end, Henry sighed. "Daniel, maybe the best thing you can do for Emma is leave her be? You've gone too far." But Daniel nearly shouted, "No, I love her. This isn't a plan anymore, not an experiment. She's the only one who's ever truly seen me." Daniel threw himself into the search. But in a city of millions, finding Emma, a woman with few connections, was harder than any financial deal he had ever faced. Day after day, with no news, he finally understood. He had lost the most precious thing at the very moment he realized he could not live without it. He discovered that being one of the richest men in London meant nothing when what he longed to recover was a woman with every reason to hide from him. Emma had vanished from London as if she had never existed. Every day without her was torture. He immediately abandoned the charade and began walking normally again. But ironically, that was when he truly felt paralyzed. Paralyzed by guilt, by the fear that he had forever lost the woman he loved. He hired 3 private detective agencies, placed ads in the newspapers, and scoured every cheap hotel, but Emma seemed to have vanished into thin air. Only one clue remained. She had withdrawn all her savings, $55,000 after 3 years of work. On the 5th day, Sophia returned from Milan and was stunned to see Daniel walking as if nothing had happened. He had even forgotten her existence. When Sophia cheerfully suggested they go to Marbella as planned before the accident, without asking a single question about the week he had been paralyzed, Daniel saw the truth clearly. She only cared about pleasure. In that moment, he ended the relationship for good. That night, in the empty mansion, Daniel came up with a new direction. If he could not find Emma, he would search for Emma's younger brother, Lucas Hayes, was studying medicine. Daniel found him in the university library, surrounded by stacks of thick books. The young man looked up, eyes so much like Emma's, deep and luminous, yet filled with coldness. When Daniel introduced himself, Lucas shut his book firmly, his voice taut. "Do you have any idea how badly you hurt my sister? She cried for 3 days straight when she came home." Daniel broke down, confessing his guilt completely. He said he did not expect Lucas to forgive him, only to deliver a message to Emma, that he loved her, that he regretted his deception more than anything in his life, and that if he could give up all, money, fame, his entire career, to turn back time, he would do so without hesitation. Lucas remained silent for a long time, studying Daniel's face intently. Finally, he spoke softly. "If you truly love my sister, leave her alone. She deserves a love without lies." Daniel lowered his head, his heart weighed down like stone. Yet in the depths of despair, he knew at least that Emma had heard the most honest confession he had ever spoken, even if only through her brother. After his meeting with Lucas, Daniel returned to London with a heart heavier than ever. He thought perhaps the most loving thing he could do for Emma was to leave her in peace, to allow her to rebuild her life far from the pain he had caused. Yet miles away, in a small rented room in Brighton, Emma read every message Lucas had faithfully passed on. His words of regret had reached her, stirring emotions she thought were buried forever. Those words of regret awakened in her emotions she thought she had buried forever. 2 weeks after meeting Lucas, Daniel returned to London with a heart heavy as stone. The grand mansion now felt like a gilded tomb where every room echoed Emma's memory. The kitchen where she had prepared his breakfasts with care, the living room where their conversations had flowed, the bedroom where she had kept sleepless vigil over him. He lived in that house like a shadow, working mechanically, eating sparingly, tossing through nights haunted only by regret. Then, on a cold gray November morning, the doorbell rang. The postman handed him a parcel from Cardiff. Inside lay a handwritten letter, the soft strokes of Emma's pen. She wrote that if Daniel had truly changed, she would give him one chance to explain. She asked to meet him the following day at 3 o'clock in Hyde Park, the place where, 3 years ago, they had first crossed paths, though Daniel no longer remembered. By 2 o'clock, Daniel was already at the park. He sat on a wooden bench, clutching a small silver crucifix, his mother's gift, which he thought he had lost, now returned by Emma along with her letter. Each minute dragged on like an eternity. At precisely 3, he saw Emma approaching along a path strewn with golden leaves. She wore a simple beige coat, her hair loose and natural, her face thinner, yet her eyes still bright. They stopped before each other, only a few steps apart, though the distance felt like an ocean. Emma recounted how 3 years earlier she had sat crying on a park bench here, terrified she would fail her interview for a job at the Whitmore mansion. It was Daniel, out on a morning run, who stopped, handed her a handkerchief, and said, "Courage isn't the absence of fear, but acting despite it." In that moment she had fallen for the kindness in his eyes. But once employed, she had seen only a cold, distant Daniel, hidden behind wealth and ambition. It wasn't until the week of his feigned paralysis that she glimpsed again the man she had first admired. And so his betrayal had cut even deeper. Hearing this, Daniel sank to his knees on the damp grass, his trembling hands grasping hers. His voice broke. "I swear I will never deceive you again. If you give me one chance, I will spend the rest of my life proving you deserve all the love in the world." Emma looked down, her heart stirred by the sincerity in his eyes. After a brief hesitation, she nodded softly. "Just one chance, Daniel. If there is ever another lie, it ends forever." Emma looked at him, the powerful man now kneeling for love, and the wall of pain in her heart began to crack. She told him to stand up, saying everyone was watching. He replied, "I don't care about anyone else. I only care about you." When their hands touched, they both felt the flame of love that had never truly gone out. Emma agreed to give him one chance, only one. If there was ever another lie, everything would end forever. Daniel clasped her hand tightly, his eyes burning with fire. One chance was all he needed. In that moment, Daniel felt reborn. Beneath the fading winter sky, they walked hand in hand, slowly, as though the world itself had granted them a second chance. That afternoon, after their meeting in Hyde Park, Daniel drove Emma back to Whitmore Mansion. The car rolled slowly over the gravel path, a road Emma had walked countless times before as a servant, but today each crunch of stone beneath the tires felt like the heartbeat of a new beginning. When the mansion's heavy doors opened, Emma paused at the familiar threshold. To her, this house had always symbolized distance, an unbridgeable gap between the wealthy master and the ordinary maid. But this time, when Daniel opened the door and extended his hand, his eyes no longer belonged to a proud billionaire, but to a man learning to love with unguarded sincerity. The mansion was unchanged, the oil paintings along the walls, the spiraling oak staircase, the towering windows bathed in dusk light. Yet for Emma, the space felt transformed. She stepped into the kitchen where she had spent hundreds of mornings preparing meals, but for the first time not as a servant, rather as someone cherished. Daniel followed quietly, watching every flicker of expression on her face as though fearing she might change her mind and walk away at any moment. That night, they sat in the drawing room, fire crackling in the hearth. Daniel spoke of years spent behind a cold facade, terrified of showing weakness and of the misguided plan that had cost him almost everything. Emma listened, her eyes glistening at times, but she never interrupted. When he ended with a vow that from now on he would live only in truth, she nodded softly. "I believe you, but I'll trust your actions more than your words." In that moment, Daniel stepped closer, taking her hand in his. They sat in silence for a long time, hearing only the crackle of fire and the steady merging of their heartbeats. At last, Daniel kissed Emma, not the kiss of a man claiming possession, but the trembling kiss of someone who had once lost everything and now knew he had found the one treasure he could never afford to lose again. In the days that followed, Emma grew accustomed to her new role. She was no longer the housekeeper, but Daniel's companion. They shared breakfast on the balcony, walked slowly through the winter garden, and spent hours talking about the simplest of things. For Emma, every moment was proof that Daniel had truly changed. For Daniel, it was redemption. Each smile from Emma seemed to erase a piece of the darkness inside him. One early morning, as the first rays of sunlight streamed through the glass, Daniel turned to Emma, his voice quiet yet resolute. "I don't know what the future holds, but I do know this: if I have you, I won't be afraid of anything." Emma smiled, resting her head against his shoulder, and for the first time after all the storms, they both felt they had finally found where they truly belonged. After days of newfound peace, Daniel knew there was only one way to prove to Emma that he had truly changed, by turning their love into a lifelong promise. The thought of proposing came to him on a winter morning, when he saw Emma sitting in the mansion's small library, reading an old novel, a faint smile on her lips. In that moment, Daniel realized this was the woman he wanted by his side forever. He began to plan. No extravagance, no spectacle, no flashing cameras or media spotlight. Those things had once cost him himself, and he would not repeat that mistake. What he wanted was a simple evening, just the two of them, bound by words of truth. Daniel chose the winter garden behind the mansion, a place Emma loved to stroll each morning. He asked the gardener to line the path with candles, to hang small lanterns among the bare branches so their golden light would fall softly upon the thin snow. At the garden's center, he set a round table, laid with a warm dinner he had prepared himself, clumsy but heartfelt. When Emma stepped outside and saw the scene, she froze, her eyes glistening. Daniel walked forward, took her hand, his heart pounding. His voice trembled, yet each word was clear. "Emma, I lost you once, and it was the greatest mistake of my life. I can't promise life will always be easy, but I promise that from now on, I will love you with honesty, respect, and all of my heart. Will you be my wife?" Tears welled in Emma's eyes. She needed no roses, no dazzling diamonds, only the love she now saw shining in his gaze. She nodded, whispering, "Yes, Daniel, I will." In the glow of hundreds of flickering candles, they embraced tightly. The kiss they shared that night was not merely the start of a marriage, but the seal of redemption, a mark upon two souls that had once lost each other, now found again, forever. Daniel and Emma's wedding took place 1 year after his proposal, in the same winter garden behind Whitmore Mansion, where he had once knelt to beg for her love. There was no extravagance, no flashing cameras, no celebrity guests, only family, close friends, and those who had witnessed Daniel's transformation. Lucas, now a medical graduate, stood proudly beside his sister, his eyes shining with joy. Henry Collins was there too, smiling quietly as he watched his childhood friend finally find true peace. As Emma walked down the aisle strewn with white petals, Daniel felt his heart stop. He had once possessed all the wealth the world admired, but only now did he understand. True riches were not measured in bank accounts, but in this moment, when the woman he loved walked toward him to be his partner for life. After the wedding, they built a simple, yet deeply fulfilling life. Daniel abandoned the flashy lifestyle, choosing instead to spend more time with Emma. They strolled through parks together, cooked humble meals, and shared moments so small they seemed invisible. Yet in truth, they were priceless. 2 years later, Emma gave birth to a daughter they named Grace, a symbol of redemption and blessing. When Daniel first held his baby girl in his arms, he wept like a child. "I once thought the greatest success of my life was the company, the numbers on the stock exchange," he whispered to Emma. "But now I know the greatest success is having you, and her." Emma smiled, brushing his tousled hair, her eyes shimmering. "We've endured so much loss, Daniel, but because of that, we can truly understand the value of this happiness." The mansion, once a symbol of loneliness and deceit, became a home. The sound of a child's laughter echoed through its wide halls, mingling with evenings spent together by the fire. No longer was there distance between master and servant, billionaire and ordinary woman, only a family bound by love. Every weekend, Daniel and Emma would take Grace to Hyde Park, the place where they had found each other again after all the pain. On the same weathered wooden bench beneath the trees, they sat hand in hand, watching their daughter run freely. To them, it was proof that true love could bloom, even when born from a mistake. Their story was not a fairy tale, but a truth forged through pain, loss, and forgiveness. It was a reminder that sometimes one must lose everything to discover what matters most. That true love is not measured in diamonds or supercars, but in sincerity, in quiet sacrifices, and in the strength to forgive. Above all, their story proved this: happiness is not about finding someone perfect, but about finding the one who can see us at our weakest and still choose to stay.